The Neuroscience of Effort-Driven Motivation, How Action Precedes Drive in Organizational Performance. Abstract. Traditional motivation theories position desire as the precursor to action. But contemporary neuroscience reveals a more nuanced mechanism. Effort itself generates the neurochemical signals that sustain motivated behavior. Dopaminergic pathways respond not primarily to reward consumption but to goal pursuit, effort expenditure, and progress detection. This reversal has profound implications for how organizations design work systems, structure goals, and support sustained performance, rather than waiting for intrinsic motivation to emerge. Evidence suggests that behavioral activation, initiating effort even in low motivation states, triggers dopamine release that reinforces continued action. This article synthesizes research from neuroscience, organizational psychology, and behavioral economics to examine how effort motivation loops function, their impact on individual and organizational outcomes, and evidence-based interventions that leverage these mechanisms. Organizations that structure work to emphasize visible progress, effort recognition, and iterative achievement create neurobiological conditions for self-sustaining motivation, reducing dependence on external incentives while improving well-being and performance outcomes. Most leadership development programs, performance management systems, and change initiatives rest on a foundational assumption: people must feel motivated before they act. Managers are taught to inspire teams, to articulate compelling visions that ignite passion, and to cultivate intrinsic drive as a prerequisite for effort. Yet neuroscience research over the past 2 decades suggests this sequence may be reversed. The brain's reward circuitry activates not in response to desire alone, but in response to effort, progress, and the anticipation of achievable goals. Berridge and Robinson. 2016. Dopamine, long mischaracterized as a pleasure chemical, functions primarily as a signal for pursuit, released when organisms engage in goal-directed behavior, particularly when that behavior is effortful. Salomon and Correa. 2012. This insight matters because organizations face persistent challenges in sustaining employee engagement, especially during periods of ambiguity, transformation, or routine work that lacks obvious intrinsic appeal. The question is no longer simply how do we motivate people, but rather how do we structure conditions that allow effort itself to generate motivation. The practical stakes are substantial. Organizations that understand effort motivation dynamics can design feedback systems, goal architectures, and recognition practices that create self-reinforcing cycles of action and drive, reducing burnout while increasing adaptability. This article examines the neurobiological foundations of effort-driven motivation, its organizational and individual consequences, and evidence-based responses that leverage these mechanisms to build cultures of sustained, self-generated drive. The neuroscience of motivation landscape defining dopamine's role in pursuit and effort. Dopamine has been popularly framed as the brain's reward molecule, released when we experience pleasure. This characterization is incomplete. Research distinguishes between liking, hedonic pleasure, mediated by opioid systems, and wanting, motivational drive, mediated by dopamine. Berridge and Kringelbach. 2015. Dopamine does not encode pleasure itself. It encodes the anticipation of reward and the willingness to work for that reward. Salomon and Correa. 2012. Demonstrate that dopamine depletion does not eliminate the capacity to enjoy rewards, it eliminates the willingness to expend effort to obtain them. Animals with depleted dopamine will consume freely available food but will not press levers or climb barriers to access the same food. This finding reframes motivation as an action-oriented process. Dopamine surges when the brain detects that effort is moving an organism closer to a goal, not merely when the goal is achieved. Functional MRI studies reveal that dopaminergic activity peaks during anticipation and effort phases, often more than during reward consumption. Knudsen et al. 2001. The implication is that progress signals intermediate milestones. And visible movement toward goals may generate more sustained motivation than the final outcome. Prevalence and mechanisms of effort reinforcement loops. The effort motivation loop operates through several interrelated mechanisms. First, dopamine release following effortful action creates a positive association between the behavior and the neurochemical reward, increasing the likelihood of behavior repetition, a form of reinforcement learning. Schultz, 2015. Second, the brain appears calibrated to respond more strongly to uncertain, variable rewards than to guaranteed ones, a phenomenon exploited by everything from casino slot machines to social media notifications. Fiorillo et al. 2003. This uncertainty preference means that challenging, effortful tasks, where success is not guaranteed, can generate stronger dopaminergic signals than easy, predictable tasks. Third, the perception of autonomy and control amplifies dopaminergic response. When individuals perceive their effort as self-directed rather than externally imposed, dopamine release intensifies, strengthening the effort-motivation connection. Liotti et al. 2010. This finding helps explain why micromanagement undermines motivation even when tasks are objectively the same. The neurobiological reward for effort diminishes when agency is constrained. Finally, social context modulates dopamine pathways. Research in social neuroscience shows that recognition, status gains, and cooperative achievement activate dopaminergic circuits similarly to material rewards. Izuma et al. 2008. Organizations that provide clear social feedback on effort, through peer recognition, transparent progress tracking, or collaborative goal structures, tap into these circuits, amplifying the neurochemical payoff for action. Organizational and individual consequences of effort motivation dynamics. Organizational performance impacts. Organizations that fail to leverage effort motivation loops often experience engagement plateaus, particularly in roles characterized by routine tasks, ambiguous feedback, or delayed outcomes. Gallup's global engagement data consistently show that fewer than 20% of employees report feeling engaged at work, with unclear goals and inadequate recognition cited as primary factors. Harter et al. 2020. When employees cannot detect progress or when effort goes unrecognized, dopaminergic reinforcement weakens and motivation decays, not because people lack intrinsic drive, but because the neurobiological conditions for sustaining drive are absent. Conversely, organizations that structure work to emphasize visible progress and effort recognition report measurable performance gains. Amabile and Kramer, 2011, analyzed diary entries from knowledge workers across multiple industries and found that the single most important factor predicting motivation and positive emotion was the perception of making progress in meaningful work, even small, incremental progress. Days characterized by minor forward movement generated stronger engagement than days with major achievements but no sense of incremental progress. This progress principle aligns precisely with dopaminergic mechanisms. The brain rewards movement toward goals more than goal attainment itself. Quantitatively, organizations that implement progress-visible work systems, such as agile development frameworks, transparent project tracking, or daily stand-ups, report 20 to 30% reductions in time to completion for complex projects, alongside increases in employee-reported satisfaction. Sutherland and Sutherland, 2014. These gains likely result not from process efficiency alone but from the motivational boost of frequent, visible progress signals that keep dopaminergic systems engaged. Individual well-being and stakeholder impacts at the individual level. Understanding effort motivation dynamics offers a counterbalance to burnout and learned helplessness. Burnout often emerges not from overwork per se, but from effortful work that yields no visible progress or recognition. Maslick et al. 2001. When individuals expend energy without neurochemical payoff, because feedback is absent, delayed, or inconsistent, the brain stops reinforcing effort, leading to motivational collapse. The perception of futility, not exhaustion, drives burnout. Research on learned helplessness supports this interpretation. Seligman and Meyer, 1967, demonstrated that organisms exposed to inescapable stress develop pervasive motivational deficits. Not because they are incapable but because their brains cease to associate effort with outcome. In organizational contexts, employees in roles with poor feedback loops, opaque decision-making, or inconsistent recognition may experience similar dynamics. Effort becomes decoupled from reward. Dopamine reinforcement fades, and motivation erodes. Conversely, individuals who actively structure their work to generate small wins and visible progress report higher resilience and lower burnout. Amabile and Kramer, 2011. This self-structuring represents a form of neurobiological self-care. By creating conditions for dopamine release, individuals sustain their own motivation independent of external validation. Organizations that teach employees to recognize and leverage these dynamics, through goal chunking, progress journaling, or self-monitoring, enhance both performance and well-being. Evidence-based organizational responses progress visible work design. The most direct organizational intervention is redesigning work to maximize progress visibility. This principle underlies agile methodologies, which decompose large projects into short sprints with frequent deliverables and daily progress reviews. The neuroscience suggests why this works. Each sprint completion delivers a dopamine signal. Each daily stand-up provides social recognition of effort. And the iterative structure ensures that progress is perceptible even in long-duration projects. Effective approaches include breaking large goals into micro-milestones, rather than annual objectives. Establish weekly or bi-weekly targets. Each achieved milestone triggers dopaminergic reinforcement. Using visual progress tracking, Kanban boards, burn-down charts, and public dashboards make effort to outcome connections explicit. Strengthening neurochemical feedback. Implementing frequent check-ins, daily stand-ups, weekly reviews, or peer huddles provide social recognition and progress confirmation. Amplifying dopamine release. Celebrating incremental achievements, formal recognition of small wins, not just major milestones, sustains motivation by maintaining high-frequency dopaminergic signals. Atlassian, the Australian software company, redesigned its product development cycle around 2-week sprints with end-of-sprint demos to the entire team. This structure ensures that every developer sees tangible progress every fortnight and receives immediate social recognition. The company reports both faster release cycles and higher employee engagement scores, attributing much of the gain to the motivational benefits of visible, frequent progress. Sutherland and Sutherland, 2014. Effort-based recognition systems. Traditional recognition programs often focus on outcomes: employee of the month, top sales performer, highest revenue generator. While outcome recognition has value, it misses the neurobiological opportunity to reinforce effort as such. Because dopamine responds to effortful pursuit, recognition systems that acknowledge persistence, skill building, problem-solving process, or collaborative contribution, independent of final results, strengthen effort motivation loops more effectively. Key design principles include recognizing process excellence, not just outcomes, highlight quality of analysis, thoroughness of stakeholder engagement, or creativity of approach, even when projects fail. Implementing peer-to-peer recognition platforms, tools that allow colleagues to acknowledge each other's effort in real time provide frequent, socially meaningful dopamine signals. Publicizing learning and iteration, celebrate experiments, pivots and lessons learned, reinforcing the message that effort in pursuit of understanding is valuable. Using variable, unexpected recognition, occasional, Unpredictable recognition activates dopaminergic circuits more strongly than predictable rewards, Fiorillo et al. 2003. Healthcare organizations have experimented with peer recognition systems that allow staff members to acknowledge each other's efforts in real time, generating thousands of recognition moments monthly. Such high-frequency, peer-driven approaches appear to support improved morale and cross-functional collaboration by creating continuous effort reinforcement environments. Autonomy and control challenge because dopaminergic response intensifies when effort feels self-directed and appropriately challenging. Organizations can enhance motivation by maximizing task autonomy and calibrating difficulty. The neuroscience suggests an optimal challenge zone. Tasks should be difficult enough to require genuine effort, triggering dopamine, but not so difficult that success feels unattainable, which suppresses dopamine. This aligns with Csikszentmihalyi's 1990 concept of flow, where challenge and skill are balanced. Organizational strategies include offering choice in task execution, allow employees to select methods, tools, or sequences, increasing perceived autonomy without changing task substance. Calibrating difficulty through scaffolding, provide supports, training, tools, mentorship, that keep tasks challenging but achievable. Maintaining dopaminergic engagement. Encouraging experimentation, create low-risk spaces for employees to try novel approaches. Reinforcing the dopamine-driven pleasure of exploration. Implementing dynamic goal setting, adjust targets based on performance to maintain optimal challenge, neither overwhelming nor trivial. W. L. Gore and Associates, the materials science company known for Gore-Tex, operates without traditional management hierarchy. Employees, called associates, choose which projects to work on based on interest and perceived impact, forming self-organized teams around initiatives. This autonomy-maximizing structure sustains high intrinsic motivation. Associates report working harder and more creatively than in previous hierarchical roles, driven by the dopaminergic reward of self-directed, challenging work. Hamill, 2011. Feedback frequency and specificity. Dopamine release depends on the brain's ability to detect that effort is producing progress. Vague, infrequent, or delayed feedback prevents this detection, weakening effort motivation loops. High-frequency, specific feedback, particularly feedback that connects specific actions to specific outcomes, strengthens the neurochemical link between effort and reward. Best practices include shifting from annual reviews to continuous feedback. Weekly or bi-weekly one-on-ones provide higher frequency dopaminergic signals than once-yearly evaluations. Making feedback behaviorally specific, instead of good job. Specify what action produced what result, helping the brain form precise effort outcome associations. Using real-time data dashboards, when possible, provide employees with live data on their performance, sales, quality metrics, customer satisfaction, allowing self-directed progress monitoring. Normalizing corrective feedback as progress, frame mistakes and corrections as evidence of learning, a form of progress, not failure, to maintain dopaminergic reinforcement even during setbacks. Several technology companies have replaced annual performance reviews with frequent, informal manager-employee conversations focused on goals, feedback, and development. Organizations implementing such systems have reported reductions in voluntary turnover and improvements in employee engagement scores, with employees noting they feel more motivated because they can see progress and adjust effort continuously rather than waiting months for feedback that often feels disconnected from day-to-day work. Psychological safety and failure tolerance because dopamine is tied to uncertainty and challenge. Organizations that punish failure suppress the neurochemical conditions for effort-driven motivation. When failure triggers social threat, status loss, or career risk, the brain's threat detection systems, amygdala, stress hormones, override dopaminergic circuits. Shifting from exploration and effort to defensive risk avoidance, ROC. 2008. Conversely, environments characterized by psychological safety, where interpersonal risk-taking is encouraged and failure is treated as data, allow dopaminergic systems to function optimally. Implementing psychological safety involves normalizing productive failure, publicly discuss failures, extract lessons, and recognize the effort behind unsuccessful initiatives. Decoupling effort from outcome in evaluations, assess individuals on the quality and intensity of their effort and learning, not solely on results, which are often influenced by factors beyond individual control. Celebrating controlled experiments, reward hypothesis testing, piloting and rapid iteration, which generate frequent dopamine signals through small-scale progress. Protecting status during setbacks, ensure that failed projects do not result in social humiliation. Demotion or isolation, which would activate threat responses. At Pixar Animation Studios, Brain Trust sessions bring directors together to critique each other's works in progress with radical candor. These sessions are psychologically safe, no formal authority is exercised, and all feedback is offered in service of the work, not as judgment of the person. Directors report that the process, though challenging, is highly motivating because they see continuous progress in their films and feel safe to take creative risks, knowing that effort and iteration will be recognized regardless of immediate results. Catmull and Wallace. 2014. Building long-term motivational capability. Behavioral activation training organizations can teach employees the neuroscience of effort motivation, transforming it from implicit mechanism to explicit practice. Behavioral activation, a therapeutic approach originally developed for depression, involves initiating small, concrete actions even in the absence of motivation, on the premise that action itself will generate motivational states. Martel et al. 2013. Applied in organizational contexts, this means training employees to start with minimal effort, lower activation energy by breaking tasks into tiny first steps, e.g. open the document rather than write the report. Track effort, not just outcomes. Journaling or logging effort expenditure creates self-awareness and reinforces the effort-motivation connection. Use environmental cues, structure physical or digital environments to reduce friction and prompt action, e.g. setting out materials the night before, automating task reminders. Organizations that embed these practices into onboarding, leadership development, or well-being programs equip employees with self-regulation tools that reduce dependence on external motivation. The result is a workforce better able to sustain performance during ambiguity, transition, or low stimulation periods. Progress monitoring and reflection rituals. Creating organizational routines that prompt reflection on progress taps into dopamine's sensitivity to incremental achievement. Regular rituals, weekly retrospectives, monthly progress reviews, quarterly goal assessments, serve as neurochemical checkpoints, providing opportunities for the brain to register and consolidate progress. Practical implementations include weekly team retrospectives. Dedicate time to discuss what was accomplished, what was learned, and what small wins occurred, reinforcing effort-reward associations. Personal progress journals. Encourage individuals to maintain brief logs of daily or weekly achievements, creating a private record of effort payoff. Visible progress artifacts. Use physical or digital representations, e.g. completed task boards, cumulative graphs, that make progress tangible and perceptible. The practice of end-of-day wins at some consulting firms requires team members to identify 3 things they accomplished before leaving work. This simple ritual ensures daily dopamine signals by prompting conscious recognition of progress, preventing the common experience of feeling busy yet unproductive. Purpose-effort alignment. Dopamine release intensifies when effort is perceived as meaningful. Research in self-determination theory shows that autonomy, competence, and relatedness, purpose, are fundamental psychological needs. When satisfied, they enhance intrinsic motivation. Ryan and Deci, 2000. Organizations that help employees connect daily effort to larger purpose, whether organizational mission, customer impact, or personal development, amplify the neurochemical reward for that effort. Strategies for purpose alignment include making impact visible, share customer testimonials, outcome data, or downstream effects of employee work, helping individuals see how effort translates to meaningful results. Personalizing purpose, encourage employees to articulate their reasons for engaging in the work. Aligning organizational goals with personal values. Highlighting contribution narratives, regularly communicate stories of how specific efforts led to team or organizational success. Reinforcing the effort-impact connection. At Medtronic, a medical device company, the annual holiday party includes a session where patients share stories of how Medtronic products changed their lives. Engineers and manufacturing staff hear firsthand the impact of their work. Creating powerful purpose-effort alignment. Employees report renewed motivation and pride following these sessions. Illustrating how purpose visibility amplifies the dopaminergic reward for continued effort. Grant, 2007. Conclusion: the traditional view of motivation, that desire precedes action, is neurobiologically incomplete. Contemporary neuroscience reveals that effort itself generates the neurochemical signals that sustain motivated behavior. Dopamine, the brain's pursuit signal, responds not to pleasure or desire alone but to goal-directed action, progress detection, and the anticipation of achievable rewards. This reversal carries profound implications for organizational design. Rather than waiting for intrinsic motivation to emerge or relying solely on external incentives, organizations can structure work environments to leverage effort motivation loops by making progress visible, recognizing effort as such, providing frequent and specific feedback, calibrating challenge, and ensuring psychological safety. The evidence suggests that organizations which align work design with these neurobiological realities achieve measurable gains in engagement, performance, and well-being. Employees in progress-visible, effort-recognized, autonomy-rich environments report higher motivation, lower burnout, and greater resilience. The practical takeaway is clear: motivation is not a precondition for action. It is a consequence of action. By teaching employees this principle and by designing systems that allow effort to generate its own reward, organizations build cultures of self-sustaining drive. In an era of constant change, ambiguity, and hybrid work, the ability to initiate action without pre-existing motivation, and to trust that motivation will follow, may be one of the most valuable capabilities individuals and organizations can develop. Organizations that master this dynamic shift from motivating people to creating conditions where people motivate themselves, reducing managerial burden while increasing adaptability and ownership. The neuroscience of effort-driven motivation offers not just an academic insight but a practical framework for building workplaces where sustained, self-generated drive becomes the norm rather than the exception.